Life always felt like a beautiful routine. I would wake up every morning beside my wife, Emily, her soft hair spread across the pillow as the early sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over our bedroom. We were more than just a couple. We were partners who shared everything. Dreams, aspirations, and even the smallest, most mundane details of everyday life. I had no idea that our peaceful existence was on the verge of crumbling, that the foundation of everything I held dear was about to shatter into a million pieces. The changes came gradually, so subtle at first that I didn't notice them. Emily had recently received a promotion at work, and with that came new responsibilities, longer hours, and increased stress. At first, I was proud of her. I admired her ambition and was more than willing to be supportive as she poured herself into her career. I told myself that her late nights at the office were just temporary, a necessary part of climbing the corporate ladder. But as the weeks turned into months, those late nights became more frequent. The warmth that once filled our homes slowly dissipated, and the conversations that used to flow so easily between us became brief, distracted exchanges. Then came the day I stumbled upon something that shook me to my core. I had been cleaning out the garage, sorting through old boxes of memories, photographs from our early years, little notes we'd exchanged, and keepsakes from special moments in our life together. I smiled at the memories, feeling a sense of nostalgia for the simpler times. But in the midst of that warm reverie, I found something that didn't fit. A receipt for a hotel room. It was dated just a week prior, and the name of the hotel was one I knew all too well. It was a boutique place, known for its romantic atmosphere. The same hotel we had visited for anniversaries and special getaways. Only, I hadn't been with her there this time. My heart raced as a million questions flooded my mind. Why would she be at our special place without me? That evening, I confronted Emily about the receipt, my voice shaky but determined. She barely batted an eye, dismissing it as a work function that had run late. She said the team had booked the hotel for some kind of after-hours meeting. I wanted so desperately to believe her. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there was a logical explanation. And so, I let it go for the moment, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. As time passed, that seed of doubt grew larger, consuming more of my thoughts. I began to notice more discrepancies, small things that didn't add up. Her excuses for staying late at work became more frequent, and our weekends, once spent together, were now filled with her plans that didn't include me. My gut told me something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to confront the possibility that she might be unfaithful. Unable to ignore my suspicions any longer, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I began to track her movements. I installed an app on my phone to monitor her calls and messages. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of the trust we'd built over the years, but my desperation for answers overpowered the guilt. And then, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. There were messages, frequent ones, from an unknown number. The conversations were flirty, filled with affectionate language that left no room for doubt. Emily wasn't just working late. She was involved with someone else. Despite the growing evidence, I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy. I planned dinners, suggested weekend outings, and made every effort to reconnect, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. But each time, she had an excuse, work, friends, anything to avoid spending time with me. The pain of her distance was almost unbearable, but I still couldn't let go of the hope that we could salvage what we had. Then came the night that everything changed. It was a chilly Friday evening, and I had decided to make one final effort. I planned a cozy dinner at home. Her favorite wine, her favorite meal, candles, and flowers. I thought maybe this would be the moment we'd finally reconnect. The night we could put everything behind us. But as the hours ticked by, she didn't come home. I called her phone multiple times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in. I paced the living room, torn between anger and fear, wondering where she was and why she hadn't come home. Just when I thought I couldn't take the anxiety any longer, the doorbell rang. I froze, staring at the door, dreading whatever awaited on the other side. When I opened it, I was greeted by a man I had never seen before. He looked to be in his late 30s, with an air of confidence that immediately unsettled me. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, and the way he looked at me sent my heart racing. "Hi, I'm Jake," he said, as if he had every right to be standing on my doorstep. "Is Emily home?" His words hit me like a freight train. My worst fears were materializing right before my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as the room seemed to spin around me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice tight with tension. "I'm a friend," he replied, his casual tone only fueling my anger. "We were supposed to go out tonight." In that moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Who was this man? What kind of friend was he to my wife? The confusion and hurt quickly morphed into a burning rage. I fought the urge to slam the door in his face and instead stepped aside, letting him in. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice cold. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble," Jake said, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I just came to pick her up." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Emily. "Hey, babe. Sorry I'm running late. Out with a friend. See you soon." The timing was almost laughable in its cruelty. "You mean this friend?" I sneered, gesturing toward Jake, whose smirk had now faded into a more nervous expression. "Look, I can explain," he stammered, his tone turning serious. "Emily and I—" "Don't you dare say it," I interrupted, my heart pounding in my chest. "I want the truth now." But before he could respond, the door opened again, and Emily walked in, her expression one of shock and guilt. The door swung open, and her face lit up with excitement until she caught sight of the tension in the room. Confusion washed over her. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us, her brows furrowed as if trying to piece together the scene. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt my world begin to collapse. I couldn't hold back any longer. Pointing at Jake, I forced myself to ask, "Explain this." Emily's face drained of color, her expression darkening as she took in the situation. Her eyes flicked to Jake, then back to me, filled with dread. "Jake, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice barely steady, trembling with uncertainty. Jake, however, didn't seem fazed. His voice, instead of guilty or apologetic, came out irritated. "I came to pick you up," he answered, his frustration more obvious than any remorse. I turned to Emily, desperately trying to keep my voice even. "Is this your friend?" Her silence was deafening. I could see the guilt in her downcast eyes as she shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my gaze. After what felt like an eternity, she finally broke her silence. We've been seeing each other for a while," she admitted, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. A cold wave washed over me. My chest tightened, and I struggled to breathe as the gravity of her confession sunk in. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to lash out in anger, but all I could do was stand there, paralyzed by disbelief. How could she have done this to us? My voice broke as I struggled to form the words. "Is this why you've been so distant? The late nights, the excuses?" Emily's tear-filled eyes met mine, and she gave a small nod. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I could hardly comprehend what she was saying. The life we had built together, the dreams we shared, was it all just a lie? My mind was racing, filled with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. What about us? What about everything we planned for? My voice trembled, raw with pain. She looked down, her lips quivering. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to hurt you, but things just spiraled out of control. Her words hit me like a hammer. I felt my heart shatter into pieces, each one heavier than the last, until all that remained was an emptiness that swallowed the love I once felt for her. Jake, sensing the rising tension, took a cautious step back. "I think I should go," he said, his eyes flicking between us, uncomfortable with the situation. This This isn't how I wanted to go down. Get out, I muttered, my voice low and cold. He hesitated for a second, then quietly slipped out, closing the door behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the room. Now, it was just Emily and me. The silence between us was unbearable, thick with all the things we weren't saying. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to ask, "What do we do now?" She wiped away her tears and shook her head weakly. I don't know." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You don't know?" My voice rose in disbelief. "You've been seeing someone else behind my back, and now you don't know what to do." Her face crumpled in despair. "I didn't think it would come to this," she cried, frustration and regret intertwining in her voice. "I thought I could end it without you ever finding out. I didn't want this." I shook my head in disbelief. "You didn't think," I said, my words heavy with sorrow. "You didn't think about me or about us. You betrayed everything we had." Tears streamed down her face. "I know," she sobbed. "I was stupid. I was selfish. I got caught up in the moment, and I didn't know how to stop." The weight of betrayal hung between us, suffocating, unbearable. I wanted to scream, to vent the fury and anguish that raged inside me. But instead, I felt numb, hollow. "Maybe we need a break," I suggested, my voice barely audible as I looked away, unable to face her anymore. "A break," she echoed, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes," I replied, swallowing hard. "I need time to figure things out. I can't pretend like this never happened. I need space." Emily nodded, her tear-streaked face understanding the gravity of what I was saying. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll give you space." She gathered a few of her belongings, and as she left the house, I felt a crushing emptiness seep into every corner of the room. I wandered aimlessly through our home, looking at the photos on the walls, pictures of us smiling and happy. They felt like memories from another lifetime, a life that was no longer mine. Days turned into weeks, and the silence in the house was suffocating. I filled my time with work, with friends, with hobbies, anything to distract myself from the gaping hole Emily had left. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the loneliness. Every time I heard a car pull into the driveway, my heart would leap with a brief, irrational hope that it was her, only to be crushed by disappointment. Eventually, I realized I couldn't live in limbo any longer. I needed closure, an end to the uncertainty. I reached out to Emily, and we agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. Sitting across from her, I could see the pain in her eyes, a reflection of the hurt I felt inside. She looked down at the table, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you. It was a mistake, and I wish I could take it all back." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. "But you can you?" I replied, my voice heavy with bitterness. "You chose him over us." She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I made a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry. I want to fix this. Can we ever go back to how things were?" I wanted to believe that we could, but deep down, I knew the truth. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I love you, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. You broke my trust." We sat there for hours, pouring out our feelings, our regrets, our hopes for the future. It was cathartic, in a way. But by the end of the conversation, it was clear that things had changed. We had changed. As we parted that day, I felt a strange sense of closure. I knew we couldn't go back to how things were, no matter how much we wanted to. In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I buried myself in work, traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting, and slowly began to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Emily. With time, the raw ache in my heart dulled. I learned to forgive, not for Emily's sake, but for my own peace of mind. I realized that while she had betrayed me, I still had the power to rebuild my life. One day, while jogging in the park, I noticed a woman sitting on a bench, engrossed in a book. As I drew closer, I recognized her, a friend from college, Sarah. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we easily slipped into conversation as if no time had passed. As the sun began to set, I felt a spark of connection with her, something unexpected but refreshing. For the first time in a long while, I found myself smiling. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I was determined to come out stronger on the other side. As Sarah and I exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again, I felt a sense of hope begin to bloom inside me. I would always cherish the memories I had with Emily, but I was finally ready to embrace new beginnings. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to find out who you truly are,